The Galactic Council Hall was an architectural marvel, its massive dome adorned with shifting constellations that glimmered like diamonds against the endless black of space. Delegates from hundreds of species sat in tiered rows, their unique forms casting long, alien shadows on the polished floor. It was a place of diplomacy, a forum where galactic civilizations convened to ensure peace, or so the Council claimed. In the center of the chamber stood Earth's representative, Ambassador Elise Carter. Clad in a simple yet elegant uniform bearing the insignia of the United Earth Federation, she appeared calm and composed, but there was steel in her gaze. Humanity's voice in the Council had always been one of reason and cooperation, even when it clashed with the often stagnant and self-serving agendas of the alien species around her. Her voice echoed through the chamber as she addressed the delegates, her tone firm yet measured. Esteemed members of the Council, the continued raids on human colonies by pirate factions must be addressed. Despite our repeated requests for assistance, the attacks have escalated, costing countless lives. Humanity has upheld its commitments to this Council. We demand the same in return. A ripple of murmurs spread through the assembly. Some species exchanged glances, others made sounds of disinterest. At the head of the hall, the High Speaker, a towering, insectoid Zrixian, clicked its mandibles in irritation. Ambassador Carter, the High Speaker intoned, its voice sharp and clicking. The Council has already ruled on this matter. We do not see sufficient evidence to warrant direct intervention. Humanity's colonies lie at the fringes of civilized space, far beyond the reach of our fleets. If you wish to secure them, you may do so without our aid. Elise's jaw tightened, but she remained composed. And when we do? What will this Council say when humanity takes matters into its own hands, when we mobilize our fleets to defend ourselves without regard for borders or treaties? Will you call us aggressors then? A small, amphibious delegate from the Crothics leaned forward, its bulbous eyes glinting with malice. Perhaps humanity overestimates its importance. You are a fledgling race, barely a footnote in galactic history. The Council's resources are not yours to command. The room erupted in quiet laughter, a cacophony of alien sounds that grated against Elise's nerves. She clenched her fists at her sides, willing herself to remain calm. Losing her temper would only confirm their worst assumptions about humans. But then, the laughter stopped. At the back of the chamber, a group of heavily armed Zrixian guards entered, their multifaceted eyes glinting with unreadable intent. Elise turned to face them, her brow furrowing. The guards moved with purpose, surrounding her in a tight circle. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the silence. The High Speaker's mandibles clicked again, this time with a note of finality. "The Council has convened privately and reached a decision regarding your recent actions. Humanity's encroachment on restricted territories, combined with your insolent demands, has been deemed a threat to galactic stability. You are hereby stripped of your diplomatic status and will face immediate consequences for your species' recklessness." Elise's breath caught in her throat. "You can't be serious. This is a farce, a kangaroo court." "It is justice," the High Speaker replied coldly. "Take her." The guards moved to seize her, but Elise didn't go quietly. She struck the nearest one with a well-aimed elbow, the move catching the insectoid off guard. She turned to run, but there were too many. Within seconds she was restrained, her arms wrenched painfully behind her back. "Humanity will not stand for this," she shouted, struggling against her captors. "You're making a mistake." But her words fell on deaf ears. The delegates looked on with dispassion, or worse, thinly veiled amusement. The guards dragged her toward the chamber's central pyre, a ceremonial structure meant to symbolize unity and the cleansing of dissent. Elise's heart pounded as the realization hit her. They intended to make an example of her, publicly and brutally. "No!" she screamed, twisting in their grip. "You're signing your death warrant!" The pyre flared to life, its flames licking hungrily at the air. The delegates watched in silence, their collective gaze fixed on Elise as the guards forced her to her knees. The High Speaker raised a clawed appendage, signaling the end. "You have defied the will of the Council," it declared. Now you will burn for it! The flames surged forward, engulfing Elise in a blinding inferno. Her screams echoed through the chamber, a haunting sound that would linger in the minds of those present for years to come. The smell of burning flesh filled the air, and for a moment, the room was silent. Then the High Speaker turned to the delegates, its tone cold and final. Let this be a lesson to all who would defy the Council. Humanity is but one race among many. They are not special. They are not untouchable. But as the smoke began to clear, a faint sound broke the silence, a single tone emanating from Elise's scorched body. It was a high-pitched ping, unmistakably human in origin. A distress beacon. The High Speaker's mandibles twitched. What is that? Before anyone could answer, the Council's communications array lit up with activity. Incoming signals from all directions, human ships breaking through restricted space and entering the Council's core systems. The alarms grew louder, more insistent, as the realization dawned on the delegates. Humanity had heard their ambassador's final cry. And they were coming. The Galactic Council's core systems were in chaos. Ships from over 100 species scrambled to respond to the sudden influx of human vessels breaking through their defensive perimeters. The once serene, orderly starways around the Council's seat of power were now filled with alarms, comms chatter, and the streaking trails of emergency maneuvers. In the midst of this turmoil, Admiral Marcus Steele stood on the bridge of the EFS Retribution, the flagship of the United Earth Federation's Navy. The hulking warship, bristling with weaponry and advanced technology, was the spearhead of a fleet that had been mobilized with ruthless efficiency. Steele's sharp, calculating eyes surveyed the holographic display in front of him. It showed the Council's core systems, with the human fleet forming a deadly wedge through the defensive lines. Each red dot on the map represented a human ship, and there were far more than the Council had anticipated. Admiral, came the clipped voice of his tactical officer. Enemy fleets are deploying defensive formations, but their response is fragmented. They weren't prepared for an attack of this magnitude. Steele nodded, his expression grim. Good. They think we're here to negotiate, to posture. Let's show them how wrong they are. The communications officer turned in her seat. Incoming message from the Council, sir. They're demanding an explanation for our incursion. Steele's lips twitched in what might have been a smile if his expression weren't so cold. Patch them through. A hologram flickered to life on the bridge, displaying the furious visage of the Zrixian High Speaker. Its mandibles clicked rapidly, a clear sign of agitation. Admiral Steele, this is a gross violation of Galactic Council law. Withdraw your fleet immediately, or we will consider this an act of war. Steele stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back. High Speaker, you burned our ambassador alive. There is no law in the galaxy that excuses such barbarism. Humanity gave you every opportunity to act with honor, and you spat on it. The High Speaker's multifaceted eyes glinted with indignation. Your ambassador defied this council. Her punishment was just. Steele's voice dropped to a dangerous growl. Your definition of just has cost you more than you can comprehend. You wanted to make an example of humanity? Congratulations. You've succeeded. He nodded to his communications officer, who cut the transmission. Steele turned to his tactical team. Begin the operation. I want every critical council facility neutralized. No unnecessary loss of civilian life, but send a message they won't forget. Yes, sir, replied the tactical officer. Deploying strike teams now. The fleet's movements were calculated and brutal. Human warships, equipped with advanced stealth and precision targeting systems, cut through the Council's defensive fleets like a hot knife through butter. For decades, humanity had been underestimated, a minor player in the galactic theater. But those who had dismissed Earth's military capabilities had failed to grasp a simple truth: humans didn't fight fair. On the surface of Terlis Prime, the planet that housed the Council's central government, strike teams descended like hawks. They targeted key infrastructure, communications hubs, power grids, and defense installations. The attacks were surgical, designed to cripple the Council's ability to coordinate a response. Captain Fiona Reyes led one of these teams, her boots crunching against the crystalline ground as she and her squad advanced toward a sprawling data center. The air was thick with smoke, and the distant roar of explosions echoed through the alien city. Rhea's helmet displayed a constant stream of tactical data, highlighting enemy positions and objectives. "Move fast," she ordered, her voice calm despite the chaos. "We're on the clock." Her squad moved with practiced efficiency, their armor blending seamlessly with the shadows. They reached the entrance to the data center, a massive structure that gleamed with the polished elegance of council architecture. Rhea's motioned for her demolitions expert, Corporal Hayes, to step forward. "Hayes, breach it." Hayes nodded, planting a small device on the door. Moments later, the charge detonated with a muffled thump, and the squad poured inside. The interior was a labyrinth of alien technology, glowing consoles and humming servers stretching as far as the eye could see. "Secure the area," Reyes commanded. "Hayes, get those files." As Hayes worked to extract the data, the rest of the squad fanned out, their weapons trained on every possible entry point. Reyes paced near the center of the room, her senses on high alert. The mission was proceeding smoothly, but she knew better than to let her guard down. "Captain," Hayes said, his voice tense. "You're going to want to see this." Reyes joined him at the console, her brow furrowing as she scanned the data streaming across the screen. It was a treasure trove of intelligence, ship movements, troop deployments, even classified council deliberations. But one file in particular caught her attention. "Operation Excision," she read aloud. "What the hell is that?" Hayes hesitated. "It looks like a contingency plan. They weren't just targeting our colonies, they were planning to erase humanity entirely. Wipe out our homeworld." Reyes felt a cold knot form in her stomach. "Copy everything," she said. "We're taking this to command." As Hayes worked, the comm unit in Reyes' helmet crackled. "Captain, enemy reinforcements inbound to your location. Multiple hostiles." "Understood," Reyes replied. She turned to her squad. "Defensive positions. We hold this place until Hayes finishes the download." The squad moved quickly, taking cover behind consoles and server racks. Moments later, the sound of alien footsteps echoed down the corridor. The first wave of attackers burst into the room, a mix of Zrixian guards and automated drones. The air filled with the sharp crack of gunfire and the hum of energy weapons. Rhea's squad fought with brutal efficiency, their tactics honed by years of combat experience. But the enemy was relentless, their numbers overwhelming. "Hayes, how much longer?" Reyes shouted over the din. "Almost there," he replied, his fingers flying across the console. Reyes ducked behind cover, returning fire with her rifle. The room was a maelstrom of chaos, the glow of alien weaponry casting eerie shadows on the walls. She could feel the pressure mounting, the enemy pushing harder with every passing second. Finally, Hayes shouted, "Got it! Data's secured! Fall back!" Reyes ordered. "We're exfiltrating." The squad began to retreat, their movements coordinated and precise. They fought their way out of the data center, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. By the time they reached their extraction point, their dropship was waiting, its engines humming with barely contained power. As they lifted off, Reyes glanced back at the burning city below. She felt a surge of anger and determination. The Council had tried to extinguish humanity's flame, but they had only succeeded in fanning it into an inferno. "Command," she said into her comm unit. "This is Captain Reyes. We've recovered critical intel. Sending it to you now." On the bridge of the EFS Retribution, Admiral Steele reviewed the data with a grim expression. The revelation of the Council's plans only solidified his resolve. "They wanted a war," Steele said softly. "Let's give them one." The Galactic Council's response to humanity's blitz was frantic, fragmented, and ultimately futile. Across the Council's core systems, human forces executed surgical strikes with devastating efficiency. The Council's once pristine planets, which had stood as symbols of unity and strength, were now crumbling under the weight of relentless assault. But Admiral Marcus Steele knew that humanity's true test was yet to come. On the bridge of the EFS Retribution, Steele stood before the holographic map, his expression carved from stone. The data Captain Reyes had recovered revealed the Council's secret weapon, a massive fleet hidden deep within an asteroid field on the fringes of the core systems. It was a force designed for extermination, a final solution to the human problem. They had called it Operation Excision. Steele turned to his tactical officer. Status on the fleet's mobilization? The officer's voice was grim. The Excision fleet is already moving, sir. Our intel suggests it will reach Earth's outer colonies within 12 hours. The words hit Steele like a hammer, but he showed no outward reaction. And their defenses? Formidable, the officer replied. Their flagship, the Sovereign Wrath, is heavily armed and shielded. The rest of the fleet is equally advanced. They outnumber us 4-1. Steele's lips thinned. Numbers have never been humanity's strength. Our ingenuity has. Patch me through to the fleet. The officer nodded, and moments later, Steele's voice carried across every ship in the United Earth Federation's armada. This is Admiral Steele, he began, his voice steady and commanding. We've uncovered the Council's ultimate plan, the complete annihilation of humanity. They've sent a fleet to wipe us from existence, to erase our homeworld and every colony we've built. We cannot let that happen. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. We face a force larger and more advanced than anything we've encountered. But they underestimate us. They think we're fragile, that we'll break under pressure. They're wrong. We're human, and we don't break. We fight. And when this day is over, the galaxy will remember why you never provoke a Deathworlder. A roar of affirmation echoed through the comms. Steele ended the transmission and turned back to his officers. Prepare for warp. We're taking the fight to them. The asteroid field where the Excision fleet lay in wait was a chaotic tangle of rock and debris, illuminated by the cold light of distant stars. The human fleet emerged from warp on the edge of the field, their engines flaring as they assumed attack formations. Steele's voice cut through the tension on the bridge. Launch the drones. I want a full scan of the field. We need to find their flagship. As swarms of reconnaissance drones streaked into the asteroid field, the tactical display began to populate with data. The Excision fleet was massive, its ships positioned strategically among the asteroids to maximize their defensive advantage. At the heart of the formation was the Sovereign Wrath, a behemoth of a warship bristling with weapons and protected by layers of shielding. Target acquired, said the tactical officer. The Sovereign Wrath is anchoring their formation. If we take it out, the rest of the fleet will lose cohesion. Steele nodded. Then we cut off the head. The opening salvo of the battle was thunderous. Human ships darted through the asteroid field, their maneuverability giving them an edge over the larger, more cumbersome Council vessels. Missiles streaked through space, and laser fire lit up the darkness like a violent light show. On the EFS Retribution, Steele directed the fleet's movements with surgical precision. His ships targeted weak points in the Council's formation, breaking through their defenses with relentless ferocity. But the Council's response was just as brutal. Human ships were destroyed in fiery explosions, their crews giving their lives to buy precious seconds for the mission to succeed. Admiral, called the tactical officer, the Sovereign Wrath is charging its main cannon. If they fire, we'll lose half the fleet. Steele's mind raced. The Sovereign Wrath's main cannon was a devastating weapon, capable of obliterating entire ships in a single shot. He couldn't afford to let it fire. Bring us in close, Steele ordered. Prepare the boarding teams. If we can't destroy it from the outside, we'll do it from the inside. The bridge crew hesitated, but only for a moment. They trusted their admiral, even when his orders seemed impossible. The EFS Retribution surged forward, its engines burning bright as it barreled toward the Sovereign Wrath. The Retribution docked with the enemy flagship under heavy fire, its shields barely holding as the boarding teams prepared to breach. Captain Fiona Reyes led the charge, her team outfitted with cutting-edge exosuits designed for zero-gravity combat. The moment the airlock opened, chaos erupted. Council soldiers poured into the corridor, their weapons blazing. Reyes and her team advanced with ruthless efficiency, their training and human adaptability giving them the edge in the close-quarters battle. "Move fast!" Reyes shouted over the comms. "We need to disable that cannon before they fire." The team pushed forward, carving a path through the enemy forces. The Sovereign Wrath was a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, each one more heavily defended than the last. Rhea's pulse pounded in her ears as they finally reached the cannon's control room. "Hayes, get that console working!" she ordered, covering the engineer as he hacked into the system. Hayes' fingers flew across the controls. "I'm in. Shutting down the cannon now. Wait, no, they've locked me out," Reyes cursed. "Options?" Hayes glanced at the power conduits lining the walls. "We overload the reactor feeding the cannon. It'll take the whole system offline, but it'll also turn this ship into a fireball." Reyes nodded grimly. "Do it." Hayes began rigging the conduits while the rest of the team held off waves of reinforcements. The room was a cacophony of gunfire and shouted commands, the air thick with the smell of burning metal and ozone. "It's done!" Hayes shouted. "We've got 5 minutes before this thing blows." "Fall back," Reyes ordered. "We're getting out of here." On the bridge of the EFS Retribution, Steele watched as the Sovereign Wrath began to destabilize. Its shields flickered and failed, and explosions rippled across its surface. "Pull us back," Steele commanded. "All ships, retreat to safe distance." The human fleet disengaged, retreating as the Council's flagship imploded in a spectacular burst of light and energy. The shockwave tore through the asteroid field, scattering debris and disabling nearby Council ships. The Excision fleet, leaderless and disorganized, began to crumble. Human ships picked off stragglers with ruthless efficiency, the once mighty armada reduced to smoldering wreckage. On the Retribution, Steele allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. The Council's most dangerous weapon had been neutralized, and humanity had sent a message the galaxy would never forget. But as the adrenaline faded, he knew the war was far from over. The Council had underestimated humanity once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. The aftermath of the battle was eerily quiet, the silence of the void interrupted only by the faint hum of systems recalibrating and the occasional crackle of comms chatter. The EFS Retribution floated amidst the wreckage of the Council's once mighty Excision fleet. Fires burned in the distance, the debris of shattered warships spinning aimlessly in the asteroid field. Admiral Marcus Steele stood on the bridge, his expression unreadable as he stared at the tactical display. The human fleet had taken heavy losses, but they had achieved the impossible. The Sovereign Wrath was gone, its destruction sending a ripple of fear through the Galactic Council's forces. Yet Steele knew this was only a tactical victory. The war was far from over. "Tactical report," Steele ordered, his voice breaking the heavy silence. The tactical officer, pale and exhausted, straightened. "Council fleet remnants are retreating, sir. They're in full disarray. Casualty reports from our side are substantial. We've lost nearly 30% of the fleet. Several ships are critically damaged." Steele nodded grimly. "And the survivors?" "Morale is high," the officer replied. "They know what we just accomplished." Steele allowed a brief flicker of pride to cross his features. "Good. Patch me through to all ships." The comms officer complied, and moments later, Steele's voice echoed across the fleet. "Men and women of the United Earth Federation, you've proven today what humanity is capable of. Against impossible odds, we've not only survived but triumphed. We've shown the Council that their hubris was their greatest weakness. But this is not the end. This was a warning shot, one they will not ignore. We must prepare for what comes next." A chorus of affirmations came through the comms. Steele turned away, the weight of command pressing heavily on his shoulders. Humanity's survival still hung by a thread, and he knew the Council would retaliate with everything they had. "Admiral," called the communications officer. "We're receiving a transmission." "It's from the Council." Steele's eyes narrowed. "Put it through." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the Zrixian high speaker. Its multifaceted eyes glinted with suppressed fury, its mandibles twitching with barely concealed rage. Behind it, the council chamber was in chaos, the delegates shouting over one another. "Admiral Steele," the High Speaker hissed, "this aggression will not stand. Humanity has violated every tenet of interstellar law. Your insolence will be met with annihilation." Steele leaned forward, his voice cold and measured. "You're mistaken if you think humanity will lie down and die. You burned our ambassador alive, plotted to exterminate our species, and dismissed us as insignificant. That ends now. If you want a war, High Speaker, humanity will give you one." The High Speaker's mandibles clicked furiously. "You cannot hope to stand against the combined might of the Council." Steele's lips curled into a faint smirk. "We just did." He gestured to cut the transmission, the hologram winking out of existence. Steele turned to his officers. "Set a course for Earth. We need to regroup and prepare for the next phase." The return to Earth was somber. The human fleet limped back to their home system, battered but victorious. On the surface, cities buzzed with a mix of relief and determination. The Federation's leaders wasted no time, convening in emergency sessions to strategize for the inevitable escalation. In a secure conference room deep within the Federation's Central Command, Steele stood before a gathering of military and political leaders. Captain Fiona Reyes was there, her arm in a sling but her posture unyielding. Engineers, scientists, and strategists filled the room, their faces etched with the strain of the past weeks. "The Council will come for us," Steele began, his voice firm. "They've seen what we're capable of, and they won't let this stand. We need to be ready, not just to defend Earth, but to take the fight to them if necessary." Reyes stepped forward. "The data we recovered from the Sovereign Wrath gives us an edge. We know their weaknesses now. Their fleets rely heavily on centralized command structures, and their technology is vulnerable to our cyber warfare tactics. If we hit them where it hurts, we can force them to the negotiating table." A murmur of agreement swept through the room. Steele nodded. "Agreed. But we need more than tactics. We need allies." An older statesman, his graying hair a stark contrast to the sharpness in his eyes, raised a hand. "The Council has alienated more than just humanity. There are species on the fringes who have suffered under their rule, who would welcome the chance to strike back. If we can form a coalition, then we can stand as equals," Reyes finished. "Not just as a lone species fighting for survival, but as part of a united front." Steele leaned on the table, his gaze sweeping the room. "Make it happen! Reach out to every species that's been marginalized, oppressed, or dismissed by the Council. Show them what humanity has accomplished. Show them that they don't have to stand alone." Over the following weeks, humanity worked tirelessly. Messages were sent across the galaxy, diplomatic envoys dispatched to forge alliances with species that had long been overlooked. The response was slow at first, but one by one they came. The Eryxians, a race of nomadic traders who had suffered under Council-imposed sanctions, pledged their ships and resources. The Corval, a technologically advanced species whose colonies had been ravaged by Council raids, offered their expertise in cyber warfare. Even the enigmatic Zyran Collective, a hive-minded species known for their neutrality, sent emissaries to discuss terms of cooperation. On Earth, factories churned out weapons and ships at an unprecedented rate. Scientists worked around the clock to adapt alien technologies, pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible. Humanity was no longer fighting alone. The Council's response came swiftly and brutally. A massive fleet appeared on the edges of human-controlled space, its sheer size dwarfing anything humanity had faced before. But this time, humanity was ready. The coalition forces, under Steele's command, met the Council head-on. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ingenuity, combined with the diverse strengths of their new allies, turned the tide of the conflict. Cyber attacks disrupted the Council's command networks, while hit-and-run tactics decimated their larger, slower ships. In the end, it was not sheer firepower that won the day, but unity. For the first time in galactic history, species that had once been divided stood together against a common foe. And they triumphed. In the aftermath, the Council was forced to sue for peace. Their arrogance, their belief in their invincibility, had been their undoing. Humanity, once seen as insignificant, had reshaped the galaxy's balance of power. On Earth, a new era began. The coalition formed during the war became a lasting alliance, a beacon of hope for those who had once been oppressed. Humanity had proven that even in the face of annihilation, they would rise. They would fight. And they would endure. Admiral Steele, standing on the balcony of Earth's Central Command, looked out over the city below. The scars of war were still visible, but so was the resilience of the people. He turned as Captain Reyes approached. "Do you think they'll ever try again?" she asked. Steele's gaze hardened. "If they do, they'll remember what happens when you push humanity too far." Reyes smiled faintly. "Let's hope they learned their lesson." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the city in golden light, Steele allowed himself a rare moment of peace. Humanity had faced the abyss and emerged stronger. And the galaxy would never forget it.